Good afternoon. Good evening, everyone. How's everyone doing today? My name is Porfirio Coronado, and I'm with Dallas Area Habitat for Humanity. And thank you so much for joining us today as we are in our fourth day of our Financial Fitness Week with financial literacy. Today, we have Mr. Brandon Jones with Comerica. He is going to be presenting on debt management. So please pay close attention as this is some great information that he's going to be speaking to. If you have any questions, please reach out to us via the chat or the Q&A, and we'll be able to answer those questions as we go. Also, just a reminder that these classes are being recorded. So in the case that you would like to come back to them, they will be recorded into our website, and you can always go back to them. And then tomorrow we have our last day, Financial Literacy Day for the week. We have two great classes. So don't forget to join us tomorrow as well.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much to the Dallas Area Habitat for Humanity for partnering with us and with these amazing projects. You all have done such a great job this week with Financial Education Week. It's going on all over the United States, and we're really happy to be a part of this series. Let's go ahead and jump in here. Before I start, let me introduce myself. My name is Brandon Q. Jones, as Porfirio mentioned. I am the Texas External Affairs Market Manager for Comerica Bank. And like he said, today we're going to talk about debt management or managing debt. In this session, we will discuss kind of the definition of debt, how debt works, ways to manage the debt, and what happens when we can't manage it, and what do we do thereafter, right? And so, without further ado, let's jump into it. And so if you have any questions, we're going to have a Q&A at the end, or in the meantime, you can share your questions in the chat, okay? All right, perfect. Get started here. All right. So we want to start off with kind of, like I said, defining debt. What is debt? There's oftentimes people use these terms interchangeably. They'll say debt and they'll say credit, but what is the difference between the two? They're actually not the same. So let's kind of break those down, right? So debt is not the same as credit. Debt is the money that you owe, right? Now, your overall credit is the ability to borrow money, right? So when we're looking at your credit score or credit, it's the ability for you to borrow money. Another term would be, term or definition for credit would be how we as the lender describe the money that we give to you as the borrower. So we credited you that money, or we've offered you or extended you credit, right? And so those terms are used interchangeably, but they're really different. And how you use credit to borrow money, which then becomes debt, right? All right. Debtors and creditors. What is the difference between a debtor and a creditor, right? So debtors owe money. So that's going to be us, the borrowers, right? So if I have a credit card, I have a home loan, I have a auto loan, I'm a debtor. Creditors and lenders loan money. So the bank, so America would be a creditor, or any of your other financial institutions would be creditors. And when you're kind of looking at your debt overall, it's important to first off understand your debt and what are some things that you need to know, right? Who you owe, right? Who do I owe? That's the first thing. Is like, you know, people want to get a hold of their debt, but don't have a great understanding of like who they actually owe. Sometimes debt has been passed from creditor to creditor. And so you have to understand who and how much you owe them. If you've paid down from your original principal, or if there have been some fees tacked on because you've not paid it, or whatever the case may be, you kind of have to understand the amount. And then how much the payments are, right? There's typically an amortization or a payment schedule associated with debt, right? A repayment schedule. when the payments are due, there's always going to be a due date associated with a loan, unless it's a line of credit, but then that still has some type of monthly due date to make sure that you're making some type of incremental payments, and other important factors about your debt, right? And so those are critical things that you need to understand about your debt first, right? Now we need to look at kind of the reasons that people get into debt, right? The main reason is to purchase assets, like it's to purchase a home. No, I mean, not a lot of people have, Dallas, I think the average housing price is, somewhere around the 200 mark in Dallas. So nobody has like $200,000. Not a lot of people, right? Let me say not nobody, but not a lot of people have $200,000 in their pocket to go buy a home in cash. They typically need to acquire a loan to purchase an asset, right? Or an asset could be a car or a boat or whatever that may be. To pay your bills sometimes. Some people will get into debt just to live, right? And so you may be behind on, let's just say, utility bills or some of your vital bills, and you need to go out and take a loan, just to kind of make ends meet. And that happens a lot, right? To cover unexpected expenses or emergencies, those are always waiting around the corner. And so you always have a medical emergency that you need to attend to. The car got on flat this week, the battery went out. There's always something going on. If you have a house, something breaks down like every day. So unexpected expenses. Or if you just want to buy something you want to need. Sometimes I've seen people literally go into debt or take on some debt to take a vacation or to do to buy something that they really, really want, right? Because they want it right now and they want some instant gratification, right? So let's kind of look at the nuts and bolts of how debt works, right? And so we're going to look at some scenarios and then some associated terms, or as it says here, some lingo that's associated with that situation. So a loan with collateral that the lender can take if the loan is not repaid according to the loan agreement. And so if you're looking at it, you're thinking, well, what type of loan would that be, right? Or what is that? A loan with collateral that the lender can take if the loan is not repaid according to the loan agreement. Does anybody know the answer to put in the chat? So this is a secured loan. And so we'll kind of get into what these actual terms mean in the later slides, but these are just some fun questions. Right? All right. Debt lingo 2, how much money you borrow? It's going to be your principal, your interest, or your fees. Anybody want to put the answer out there in chat?
All right, let's go ahead and participate and see what that is in there. All right, we have A, principal.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I said that we have in the chat that they're saying A, principal.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry, because I can't see the chat. So thank you so much. Yes, correct. Principal is the original amount of money that you borrow from a creditor. Correct. All right. The main cost of borrowing the money, or in the last slide, the principal, would that be your current balance, interest, or credit? What are people saying in the chat?
They are saying B, interest.
Correct.
Conquesta says B. Magenta says B.
That's correct. So B, interest. Yes, that is the main cost of borrowing money. The term interest can be used interchangeably. So it can be the money that you pay a creditor, or it can be the money that we as banks pay out to our depositors, right? For putting money into the bank or for letting us use your money so that we can lend it out to other folks. Yeah, good, everyone. All right, question 4. A credit management that allows you to borrow money from time to time up to a pre-approved maximum credit line. Kind of gave a hint there, but is that a installment loan, B, revolving credit, or C, lease agreement?
Marjanta say A, maybe. Keisha says B as in revolving credits. Janet Gutierrez says A, installment loan.
Okay, I think I heard Keisha B, right? And
Yes,
she's correct.
yes.
So A and B are almost alike, but an installment loan, I believe it covers this in the slide coming up, but if it does, we'll just talk about it again. But an installment loan is where it's like typically a larger loan that is collateralized, and meaning that it's backed by some asset, whether it be a car or home or boat or some land. And that is paid out in equal increments over a schedule over time. So if you bought a home that's $150,000, typically you're going to do a installment loan over 30 years. A 30-year fixed payment is what an installment loan is. A revolving credit is what this describes, is where a creditor will extend you an amount of money, which is the maximum credit line. So this is like a credit card. So it's like a $25,000 credit line. And you can borrow the money from time to time, meaning that you go to the store. Every time you go to the store and swipe your credit card, that's borrowing money from time to time. And then you'll pay it back over a period of time. So you use a little bit, you pay a little bit back, you use a little bit, you pay a little bit back. And that typically doesn't have any type of life. It doesn't have a life to it. It goes on forever, kind of. All right, question 5. The total cost of credit on a yearly basis. Is it A, annual fees, B, annual adjustment, or C, annual percentage rate? What are people saying out there in the chat?
We have Elviria. She says A, annual fees. Contessa says A. Mr. Adams says C, annual percentage rate. Belinda says C, annual percentage rate. So it's between A and C.
Okay. So the correct answer, I believe I heard of Mr. Adams, is C. It's the annual percentage rate. And so as we were taught as bankers, this is what we call the true cost of the loan. And so you will sometimes, if you're looking at a rate sheet, and typically customers don't see it, but you will see it in your, what we call the truth in lending page of any type of a loan. And that's where you see at the top, there's typically like these rectangle, these boxes. And from left to right, it'll kind of say, this is the principal that you borrowed. This is your rate. These are fees associated with it. This is some other costs associated with the loan. And this is your annual percentage rate, which is typically going to be higher than your rate. And then they'll say, prepayment period or something like that. It'll have all of that on there. But the annual percentage rate is a true cost of the loan, because the annual percentage rate is the rate plus any applicable fees rolled up into a higher percentage number. So your rate may be, let's just say 2.99%, right? But then once you roll in any other types of fees associated with that loan, especially if it's a mortgage loan or something like that, origination fees, titling fees, whatever those fees may be, then that becomes your annual percentage rate. And so you always want to ask for the annual percentage rate, because that is the true cost of the loan over a year's time, right? So make sure you always quote at that rate. Wanted to talk about annual adjustments as well, because they happen. So we used to have this, and we still sell it. It's still a product for many institutions that do mortgage lending, but you just have to use it carefully. But it has some advantages. But anybody heard about the ARM loan? Remember those back in the day when the housing situation happened and ARM loans, the adjustable rate mortgages, ARM loans were being handed to people. And so that's what the annual adjustment is. And it had written in a loan that you would pay a certain amount on this loan for a certain period of time. And then after that period of time, the rate would adjust. And so instead of it being like a 30-year fixed loan where you had the exact same rate over 30 years, This ARM loan would say for the first 5 years, your rate would be, I don't know, like 2.5%. And then at the 5th year, your rate would adjust and it would go up to another amount, right? And so that's what an annual adjustment is. And then some annual fees, you'll kind of see those sometimes on credit cards. You see those a lot on credit cards where they'll charge like an annual fee to actually to use the card. And those are going to be your cards typically that have some type of benefit to them, like travel points or something like that, some exclusivity to your card, right? So cool. All right. Next question. When you borrow a specific amount of money and repay it over a set period of time, the answer is, and I actually just gave y'all the answer to this one while talking.
Who was paying attention? Let's see. What do you think?
See the chat blinking.
Keisha says C, installment loan. Janet says C, installment loan. Marjanta says C, installment loan. Adam Miller, C, installment loan. So it's the majority of them are saying C, installment loan.
Hey, y'all listening to me. Thank you. Yes, the answer is C, installment loan. So I don't have to recover any of these because we kind of talked about these terms already. All right, so 7, a loan with no collateral. So you do not back the loan by any asset. Is it A, a secured loan, B, an unsecured loan, or C, a mortgage?
We have Marjanta says B, unsecured loan. Keisha, she says B, unsecured loan. Wee says unsecured loan. So yeah, everyone's saying B, unsecured loan. I believe they were here in our earlier class this afternoon when we were talking about unsecured loans.
Nice, yeah. So yeah, actually, yeah, that is correct. Unsecured loan. A secured loan is going to be it could be a CD secured line of credit is a secured loan where you secure with a CD. A secured loan will be an auto loan. It will be a boat loan, something that has an asset tied to it, right? Whether it's money or an actual asset. But mortgage is an actual type of secured loan, but it's specific because it's tied to a piece of real estate. But it is in itself a secured loan. And your unsecured loans are going to be your lines of credits and your credit cards, which are a little bit different. But yeah, any type of money that's not tied to any type of asset that you own for collateral is unsecured. All right. And so we've kind of talked through this, but installment loans. Principal is the amount of money that you borrow. The term, how long you have to repay the principal and pay the interest. And generally, you'll pay the same amount every payment unless there's a variable or adjustable interest rate. We talked about that already, right? All right. And revolving credit. It has a credit limit, the most amount of money you can borrow. Your payment is based on the amount of credit that you use. So the more credit that you use on your line, or the more of your line that you use, the more your minimum payment will be. And it's often about 1% to 5% of the outstanding balance of the credit line or the credit card, right? So if you pay more, you pay it off sooner, it's less interest. But if you use more, you pay it off slower, you're going to pay more interest. Right? Fees. So there are additional charges that are not the interest. So make sure you understand all the fees that you'll be charged for a loan, and then the fees that you may be charged for your loan. And this is really typical with, like I said, mortgage products, because there are a lot of little fees that you have to pay. If anybody in here is going through the home buying process, has gone through it, you look at that sheet and you say, oh my gosh, all of these fees, you got to pay these title fees, the origination fees, this fee, that fee. And so this is what it's talking about in terms of those fees. So understand before you get into a loan, what the fees are and actually how those fees end up affecting your annual percentage rate in the end, or how much you're going to pay out in the end, right? So let's look at repayment. Early repayment of all a part of the loan is what prepayment is. It reduces the interest cost, right? Because you're paying it off early. And like I said, that may mean that you'll pay it off at an earlier date. But always ask if there are prepayment penalties for the loan. Some loans have those built in because some lenders want for you to have that obligation for the total term that you agreed to, so they can collect all of the interest associated with the loan. And then some lenders say, hey, if you pay us back early, then that's okay with us. We won't penalize you. But that's typically, like I said, it's going to be in that truth. We call it the truth in lending portion of your loan. Like I said, it kind of breaks down your rate, your annual percentage rate, your principal, and your payment terms and all of that. And so I always ask about prepayment penalties, if you can, associated with the loan. All right. So let's go into the section that talks about reducing debt. How do we pay this down, right? So there are two strategies for reducing debt. One of them is called the high cost debt first method. And in that method, you pay off debt with the highest cost to you. So typically with the highest interest rate. Or you can do the snowball method, where you pay off the debts that have the lowest balance or the smallest debts first. The high cost debt method has some advantages. With this one, you'll save money because if you're tackling the debts that have the high interest first, then of course you're going to save some money because you're literally not paying the high interest or the money that you owe in addition to your principal to the creditors, right? But the disadvantage is it may seem slower, right? Because you think of it as you have 4 cookies, right? And you start eating the larger cookie first, right? Before you get to the smallest cookie, you're probably going to be full, right? So you're going to have to wait some time till you can eat some more to eat all 4 cookies because, you started with the larger one first. It kind of made you full first. So think about it like that. So if you want to do this method and you're interested in saying, hey, I really want to save some money and you have the money to do this, definitely do it because it's going to save you some funds in the end. So how you do this, you'll list your highest cost debt to the lowest cost on the list, and you'll pay the amount due on each debt, make an extra payment to the first debt on the list, so the debt with the highest cost to you. And after you pay off the debt, make an extra payment to the next debt on the list. So that says, like, if you at this point paid off debt number 1, which is the highest interest debt, then now you'll go to debt number 2, and then you'll make an extra payment to that one, which is now your highest cost debt. And then you'll just continue as needed until you're done paying off your debt. So it's a cool method. Now, the snowball method is the method that I love the best. And I've actually used this method because it makes me feel so good to achieve goals. I like little bitty wins. And so if I can go check some box off somewhere, that makes me happy. It gives me like instant gratification, right? And it also gives me really good energy to want to move forward. So the advantages of this is it makes progress faster. If you got 4 debts and you got a $100 debt, $200, $300, and a $400, and you can pay off the $100 debt and the $200 debt, that's $300, and you can get that paid off and it's off your credit report. It makes you feel good to look on your credit report and say, man, I paid it off. I did it, right? And then you can go on and tackle them. But it's a mental thing, right? But the disadvantage is you may pay more money because your highest cost debt is still there lingering and you've not gotten to that specific one yet, even though you're making your way up the list. So to attempt this method, you would list your debts, lowest balance, smallest debt amount to the highest, and then you would make an amount due on each of the debts, pay an extra payment to the first debt on your list, and then after you've paid off that debt, then like I said, go to the next one and pay that one off, and then you will continue to pay until all of the debts are cleared. Most people use the snowball method because, like I said, it gives you that really good feeling of instant gratification and achievement. But either way, it doesn't matter which one of these methods you use, you're paying off the debt at the end of the day. So like Nike says, just do it. Whatever method you're gonna do, just do it. If you need some help with any of these, there are several nonprofit credit counseling organizations out there. So make sure that you look them up, vet them, make sure that they're nonprofit. You can go to usa.gov and search credit counseling. And then there, they'll give you kind of tips from the Federal Trade Commission on how to find and choose a reputable credit counselor, okay? Now, make sure that you're very careful, right? With, debt settlement companies and debt consolidation loans, right? They offer to make deals with your creditors, but they may charge you for them. So sometimes you'll see the commercials on TV. So what they'll do is they basically take over your debt process. They may even go and clear up all of your debt, but what they're going to do is in return, charge you a fee for that service. And so make sure that you understand what the fees and costs are associated with these types of deals, and make sure that you're comfortable with them. Typically, you can kind of do this process on your own and not have to rely on one of these types of companies. Debt consolidation loans, that's one loan that can be used to pay off multiple debts. Ask about interest rates, fees, and other costs. I've done this myself, not a general debt consolidation loan, but I've consolidated debt from one place to another. So, for example, what we would tell people a lot is let's just say, but you have to be really disciplined with this one. You can like move credit card debt from one credit card that has a very high interest rate, let's just say, to another credit card that has a 0% interest rate. So sometimes you'll see where they have introductory credit card rates where you'll have 0% interest rate for 6 months or a year. And if you've had a credit line that's a little bit older, you can literally move the money over. But you have to be extremely difficult because you can't go back and use credit card A, and then now you have debt on credit card A and credit card B, right? You might have to cut up credit card A and not use it. But it also creates another trade line, another credit card, another line of credit on your credit report as well. So tread carefully with that one. And with all debt consolidation loans, make sure you ask about rates, fees, and costs associated with any type of consolidation loan before you attempt it, okay? So let's talk about non-payment of debts and debts that are in collection. A lot of us have hit hard times and we've not had the money to pay our debts. And that happens a lot. That's happened to me before. That's happened to millions of Americans, and especially during COVID. So what do we do in that situation and how do we tackle it, right? And so let's look at the life cycle of debt and current debt, meaning that you are up to paying as agreed in your obligations. So you take on the debt, you pay on time and as agreed, that's current, and then you keep current and eventually you'll pay off your loan, right? Easy. This is the life cycle of debt that's not current. So this one, you take on debt and then you miss payments. That makes the debt delinquent. And then at that fault, the debt is then in a default status, meaning that you did not meet the obligation of the original, you didn't meet the original loan obligation. And then it goes into charge off, which means that at this point you owe it. And the debt has gone into almost like a settlement mode, and it's now been applied to your credit report as an outstanding debt that has not been paid, and that's when you take the hit to your credit report. And then it's issued to collections. So at that point, a collection agency or firm or company may come in to a creditor and say, hey, we'll buy your debts from you and we'll manage them, and we will go in and seek to collect that debt. We'll take on ownership of the debt, and then more than likely the original creditor, let's just say a large institution or a bank, will sell it to a debt collection agency, and then they'll handle it from there on out. So What can happen if you don't pay your debts on time or as agreed? So several things can happen if you don't pay your debts. Late fees are more money in interest. And so let's just say if you don't pay your credit card bill on time, or if you don't pay an installment loan on time, then typically there's going to be late fees associated with it. And sometimes they will increase the interest rate. It just kind of depends on the original contract. You will be contacted by the debt collector. They're going to start calling your phone, right? Saying, hey, where's our money? And then you'll lose services or paying costs to reestablish them. And so if you don't pay your debt, they may cut your credit line off. They'll say, hey, you can't use it anymore. And in order to get this credit line reestablished, you'll have to pay something extra to get your credit line or to get your car back, right? If you don't pay your car, they're going to come take your car. That's the last thing here on the list, is losing the actual collateral. If you don't pay your mortgage, that's why it's there, to secure the loan, and so you can lose it. And so that's like the very last step in the debt collection process, and you don't want it to get to there, right? What else can happen? Negative entries on your credit report, right? Of course, it's gonna everything is there on that credit report. Your credit score will drop if there are any negative impacts to your credit. Lawsuits from creditors. Sometimes we've seen wage garnishment. Typically, this is from if you owe those 3 letters, IRS, right? We've seen that happen. Or the state comptroller's office, if you're a business, we've seen that before. And account garnishment, which means that they'll kind of go into your bank accounts and garnish your funds. Those are typically with account garnishment and wage garnishment. Those are going to be from governmental entities, unless it is a private creditor and they've gone through the legal process to do that. But the government just can do it. But everybody else has to go through the legal process to get that done. All right. So before making a plan to pay your debt, make sure you know the following things. So this is where you need to go and pull your credit report to understand, right? And so you can go to annualcreditreport.com, right? Annualcreditreport.com, and you can pull one free credit report per year. And on that credit report, it won't give you the score. You'll probably have to pay for the score with the various credit bureaus. But on this credit report, it will just kind of give you a general debts, that obligations that you have, your interest rates associated with them, if you have been delinquent or are delinquent or in default with them, what is the status of it, and it'll kind of give you all of that on that credit report at annualcreditreport.com for free, right? So you'll need to know how much debt you owe, if the statute of limitations has not yet expired on that. Typically, they'll say like debt. You'll hear this, it's the truth, but it's a little bit of a myth. They'll say, oh, it'll roll off your credit report in 7 years. Well, that's if another entity doesn't purchase it, right? Debt can keep living. And so if you have an original debt, well, let's just say Bank A, and then Bank A sells it to entity B, that starts over again. Entity B now has it, that's a new creditor, 7 more years, and it can keep popping up, right, until you go and settle it, right? And if you are dealing with a legitimate debt collector, so make sure that the people who are actually calling your phone are actually people that you owe, and you will only know that because it's been reported on your credit report. If you know these 3 items, pay the debt in full if possible. So if you know all of these things and you can handle it, tackle it, and pay off the debt as soon as possible, or at least call to make payments on the debt. All right. If payment in full is not possible, set up a payment plan. So this is what I like to call the "what can you do" moment. That's when you call your creditor and you say, "Hey, I don't have our original. I can't make our original obligation, but I want to put forth a good faith effort in paying you all back. So what can we do?" Typically, creditors are going to say, "Okay, cool," because think about it as if somebody borrowed from you and you were a friend. would you rather get some of your money back or none of your money back, right? So you're gonna say, they'll say, okay, great. Well, we can set up a repayment plan and do that, right? And they may go ahead and sometimes they'll even drop your interest rate. Sometimes they may drop the monthly obligation that you owe to fit into what you can do now. So always ask, especially if the debt has been sold to a credit company or one of those debt collectors, negotiate a lower balance, right? Because typically that company did not even buy the debt for the original amount that you owe. So let's just say you owe Bank A $10,000. That credit company probably went in and bought that $10,000 debt for $2,000 or something like that, right? And so they only have an obligation for $2,000. So negotiate, go back and forth, say, hey, what can you do, right? If you cannot pay the full amount, right? And if it's not settled. So debt collectors, always remember this, they must follow the rules. They cannot be abusive to you, unfair, or deceptive in their practices. No inconvenient times and places. They can't come popping up at your job. I believe now we have there's a time, I think they can't call like after 8 o'clock. It's either 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, wherever your time is. No calls at work if you told them not to call you there. No threats, absolutely no threats or violence, no obscene or profane language. Report problems with debt collectors if you do have a problem with a debt collector, if they're being very aggressive with you, right? Everybody's falling on hard times. People are sometimes not able to make their obligations, and that's okay, right? But it's never okay for somebody to harass you about a debt that you owe because you've hit hard times. So make sure that you're putting forth a good faith effort in paying them back. And if you've fallen on hard times, let your debtor know. But in all of this, communication is definitely needed with your creditor to make it a copacetic type of a relationship. And I believe this is it. Yeah. So at this point, like, what do you do? And you ask yourself these questions. What will I do? So if you're in this situation where you're managing your debt and it's kind of gotten out of control, or you're not managing it the way that you should have, tackle it. Say to yourself, what will I do? Then after that, when will I do it? Like, when. I like to put in here when, because I like to give timelines of things. That should be immediately. And then how will I do it? There are tons of resources out there online. The FDIC, where this curriculum comes from, they have some wonderful tools. We have out on the Comerica Financial Education, we have a financial education center on the Comerica.com website, where we have some additional tools and resources to help folks get out of debt. And so do a lot of our fellow banking peers. And it's always good to help get community to help you to do things. And so will I share my plans with someone? If so, then who? I would venture to say the who should be somebody who has been there, done that, has a t-shirt, or who is a banker, right? Go down to your bank and ask a local banker, like, hey, I'm in debt. I have this situation. How can you help me? And how can you point me toward success in this situation, right? And so that's all I have. We're going to go out into Q&A at this point.
Brandon, thank you. Brandon, thank you so much.
Questions out there in the chat.
Yes, thank you so much for all that valuable information that you have provided us today. Today, we do have 4 questions that came in, if you have time.
Yeah, sure.
So the first question that Ms. Belinda is asking, she's asking, what about charge-off accounts that you have settled and came into good standing and you want to use that credit again? Are you able to do that?
It depends on the creditor. Some creditors have built into their policies that if you've like not made good on debt with them once before, then you can't have debt with them again, right? And some creditors are a bit more lenient, and they'll say, they paid us off, so yeah, we'll extend you credit again after a certain period of time. And then some say, yeah, we'll immediately extend you credit. It's just really up to the creditor. And I think in this credit situation, you have to think about it as if it were you personally, right? And so you have to think if you let somebody borrow money from you and they didn't pay it back and they were slow at paying it back, and there was an issue with them paying it back and then they eventually paid it back. Just kind of think if that were you, if you were that creditor, how would you handle the situation? And it's really up to the discretion of each creditor to how they want to handle that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for answering that. We have another question, and this question is very simple. It says that if you're trying to build your own credit, is it good to pay off debt?
Yes. So if you, let's just say you run into a situation where, your credit isn't so great and you had some opportunities in the past, right? So you have to do two things in order to reestablish your credit. You're going to have to, one, pay down the bad debt through one of the two types of repayment processes that we talked about earlier. And you're going to have to add some new credit to the mix to boost the score. And so in that situation, if you can't obtain brand new credit, like let's just say an unsecured line, nobody will issue you a credit card because you have some flaws in your credit, that's fine. You can go out and you can get a secured credit card, but you're going to have to add some new credit to the mix and also pay down the existing debt. So it's a twofold process.
All right, the next question is if I receive $1,500 in escrow surplus check, is it best to put it back into the escrow account and apply it to the principal, or use it to pay the highest interest debt?
Ooh, that's a good question. I like that. So it depends. So you want to figure out why you were sent back that much in escrow, right? And I always talk to people about like moving into developing neighborhoods, like developing areas, because they've not yet built out their infrastructure, right? So your tax base could increase next year, right? So let's just say we're here in the DFW area, right? And if I'm living smack dab in the middle of Dallas, which I do, I live in Lake Highlands. Lake Highlands is pretty established. It's one of the older neighborhoods. Not much new is going to be established around here. Probably not any new schools, no new roads. Tax base is probably going to be really consistent. In that case, I would probably go ahead and apply it to the principal of the loan or use it for some other means, right? But let's just say you're moving out into a developing area like Forney or Salina, where infrastructure has not yet been fully developed, right? There are some more schools to build, some more roads, another fire department to put up, right? Your taxes may go up next year, right? And there may be a bond election where another school is built or something like that. In that case, you'll think about it in the long term, and you probably want to put it back into the escrow account to account for the taxes next year. So you really kind of you want to look at it on a case-by-case situation to kind of see, first off, why were you sent back? Why did you pay such an overage in escrow, and why was it sent back? And what your taxes may look like for the following year. You probably just want to put it back into the account. Most people do, just to be safe if they're in a situation where they think the taxes will increase on the next year.
That was a good question.
It was a really good question.
All right, the next question is, what is the difference between the three credit bureaus and FICO?
Yeah, so the three credit bureaus and FICO. So FICO, which stands for, if I'm not mistaken, the Fair Isaacs Credit Organization. I don't know what that is. They determine the scoring of your credit through some type of algorithm that nobody has figured out. And so they determine the actual scoring of credit, right? And so they judge, then they have different factors. They look at credit mix. They look at the use of the amount of revolving credit that you have, how much credit you have as in compared to how much income you have, and certain factors to determine a score, right? And then the credit bureaus are on the other end collecting that debt information to feed into FICO. And so they, oftentimes we as creditors will, there it is, Fair Isaac Corporation, thank you. And so the credit reporting agencies receive information from debtors or from creditors that list these specific nuances of your debt obligations and use kind of some sort of that algorithm from FICO to report. So they're not, the credit bureaus are all the same, and then FICO is a little bit different. FICO determines the score and kind of the algorithm around credit scoring, whereas the credit bureaus are necessarily places where the debt is reported and where the information around the debt is housed.
Awesome. Any more questions? I believe there is no more question on the Q&A, but I didn't see any questions coming in the chat. Anyone else has any additional questions for Mr. Brandon Jones?
And if you all do have any questions, we have some amazing bankers at Comerica, so you can definitely feel free to shoot me an email. My email is B as in boy, Q as in quarter, Jones, Jones, at Comerica.com. That's BQ at Comerica.com. Shoot me an email. People do all the time and say, hey, B, this is an issue that's going on with me. Do you have somebody who can help me with this? And I'll typically shoot them to like one of our dynamic branch managers in their area, who are very well versed in helping folks in our communities prosper and be financially independent. So yeah, just let me know if you have any questions, and I can definitely get you to somebody who can help.
Awesome job, Mr. Brandon. Everyone else,
thank you. Somebody else put another question in.
Oh, they're trying to beat me to it. Okay. The question is, can you renegotiate an agreement that is already made with the debt collector?
Depends on the debt collector, Keisha. So sometimes, yes, you actually can. And so you can go in and say, hey, the original, agreement that we made is not working for me. I can't make this, or I can, at this point, pay more. I want to pay it off quicker. Debt collectors are typically a little bit more lenient with helping folks, pay down or pay off debt, right? They're just happy to get some money back. So yeah, they're pretty malleable in their approach to working with customers, but it's a case-by-case basis.
All right, thank you so much. Any more questions, anyone? Well, as you know, this is day 4 of our Financial Literacy Week with Dallas Area Habitat. And today we had Brandon Jones with Comerica. So thank you so much, Mr. Brandon, for giving us all this valuable information. Don't forget that tomorrow, Friday, is our last day, day number 5, where we're going to be talking about homeownership. We're Dallas Area Habitat. So tomorrow at 10 a.m., I will be back with Blaine, and we're going to be discussing how can you turn your stimulus check, so those stimulus checks, into maybe possibly being able to purchase a house, right? And then at noon, we're going to have a realtor with Miss Arita, having a conversation to discuss, ways that or tips on purchasing a house, okay? So thank you so much for joining us today. If you are just now joining us, remember that these videos are being recorded so that you can always go back and watch it on demand on our website. Other than that, thanks so much, Mr. Jones with Comerica, for joining us today.
Of course. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good night.